Howdy, howdy. I'm PJ, and I'm back here to make another character tier list. This time for the Chunin exams of Naruto and also Konoha Crush. Uh, I am hoping to be a little more concise, at least with these first few characters, than I was last time, because there is almost three times as many characters this time round. And I'm also hoping that the recording sounds better, as I'm trying to make what I'm saying more clear and stuff. So, uh, suppose we might as well get into it. As with my previous one, a character going into C tier will have a neutral impact on my enjoyment of the arc. Whether that be because their positives and negatives generally cancel out, or if I don't really care about them one way or the other. In D tier are characters that I think detract from the enjoyment of the arc. Um, just overall, it can be a little, it could be a fair amount. And then in F tier, we have the characters that actively make me want to skip scenes or episodes that they appear in, or make me feel less inclined to rewatch the arc as a whole. Um, the Chunin Exams is an arc that, while I like, I do tend to skip past little bits that I think are generally unimportant and tend to uh, frustrate me a lot of the time. Uh, And so, unlike Land of Waves, I'm pretty sure I will be putting a character or two in F tier. Um, yeah. So starting with 1010. 1010 is like the most nothing major character in the entire show. Like I can, having watched the show a great many times, 1010 has a couple of little comedic moments here and there, and she has two fights, neither of which are good. Uh, and I honestly couldn't really tell you what 1010's personality is like beyond girl in an anime. Um, yeah, functionally in this first arc, she mostly exists to show how strong Tamari is when they fight, and Tamari absolutely washes her. Um, yeah, but she feels very weak and irrelevant because we never see her succeed really at anything significant. Um, and so she never really gets like a story of her own. She's used to tell the audience like what some of Neji's abilities are when he fights Naruto, and it kind of feels like an unnecessary interruption for the most part. It could have been more concise at least. Um, and Uh, the one little nice thing, I suppose, or negative, I'm not really sure, is when Naruto fights Neji, she displays extreme confidence Neji will win, and she makes it seem like, oh, like Naruto has no chance. He's so screwed. And because I'm already very firmly on Team Naruto in that fight, because Neji is just so you really want to see Naruto beat the crap out of him in that fight. Uh, seeing 1010 uh basically hype up Neji makes me want to see Naruto put Neji down even more to shut her up. Um, but I don't feel too positively or negatively about that. 1010's like the definition of mediocre C tier character that doesn't add too much or detract too much. Next up, we have this guy that I learned the name of while researching. Well, not researching, but looking for an image for him. Misumi. He has like bendy arms and stuff. Uh, He's used to make Konkuro feel stronger. Uh, that's about it. He does the prelim fight against Konkuro. Konkuro gets to show off how clever he is against him, and then he's out. Uh, he's also a sound agent, if memory serves. Um, can uh, which I guess can help make Orochimaru's influence feel a little bit greater. He has like multiple spies in the Leaf and stuff. But yeah, otherwise, not too much with Misume. Uh, and then Yoroi. Yoroi at the time had a unique ability. It became much more prevalent as the series went on. But he had chakra absorption, which when he fought against Sasuke, who had the curse mark on him that would activate and mess him up should he run out of chakra. It just put Sasuke further on the back foot, which allowed for some tension in his otherwise lackluster prelim fight. But yeah, just throw him. I honestly not even sure why I decided to rank these two, but they're here. I put them on. Uh, yeah, mediocre. Um, Kurenai. So Kurenai, I think, is established to be the like rookie Jonin. Well, maybe not rookie, but like the newest of the Jonin that we see throughout the arc. Um, she's used to give the audience, I guess, a sort of viewpoint for the other Jonin to speak to, about characters that she doesn't know about. Um, which is necessary exposition utility, but not exactly characterization. Where Kurenai does get some characterization, that might incline one to enjoy her character or something along those lines is she shows concern for Hinata during her fight with Neji, which does show that Kurenai is a compassionate teacher, which is a quality I like in a character. Um, and we get a little flashback to her and Hiyashi, Hinata's father, speaking. And her father basically tells Kurenai like that he doesn't mind Hinata being put in too much danger because Hanabi, the younger sister, is like the talented one of the two. It just kind of reinforces Hinata's position of being like the less one of the less talented Hyugas, having sort of a disappointing amount of might. Starting from like a position of weakness and generally low expectations. It makes Hinata's fight a little more compelling. It just reinforces that she needs to try and overcome her shortcomings through her determination to keep trying to keep going. So makes the Hinata fight a little more impactful at the cost of pacing, I suppose. But this is early Naruto; the pacing isn't good, anyways. So, um, yeah, ever so slightly more positive. Like I have very mild positive feelings on Kurenai. Not enough for me to consider her like a good character. Oh, I think I forgot to say, being up is good character. It makes the arc more enjoyable. Uh, I think that is fairly obvious, but yeah. BAS, good characters. Um, yeah. Uh, but then next we have Asuma. Asuma's a character I end up liking more later, in Shippuden when he becomes more important. Um, but here he isn't a bad character by any means. Same as how Kurenai is characterized about caring about Hinata, we just get to see Asuma believing in and caring about Shikamaru, um, which does, portray him positively. Um, Utility wise, him saving Shikamaru after he decides to distract the sound team after him and Team 7 uh, allows Shikamaru to make a sacrifice play and get some extra heroic characterization while also keeping Shikamaru alive, so we get the good characterization. And we also get to keep Shikamaru around for later. So, decent little utility there. Um, yeah. Uh, Asuma's used to characterize Shikamaru as we get to learn a bit more about the nature of his laziness and the nature of his intelligence. I think it's during his fight with Tamari that Asuma kind of communicates to everyone else, like, no, Shikamaru's got a lot of potential. He thinks like a general, and this is then demonstrated. Just gives us a sort of puts the audience in a position to expect something good out of Shikamaru, which he then does. Um, Makes the fight more engaging than I think it would have been if we were just expecting what we've seen from Shikamaru so far, which is a little, some good cleverness, but not anything too impressive. So yeah, he's kind of like just a decent little framing device there. Um, but yeah, other than that, he's just one of the Leaf Jonin in this arc, and I like Asuma more than Kurenai from the series as a whole. But arguably in this arc, Kurenai is actually more functional to the narrative and emotional moments. But I don't know. I'm going with Asuma being higher. Ebisu. Oh boy, I don't like Ebisu. At least not in this arc. So, yeah. We do get out of Ebisu a sort of explanation of where Naruto's at in terms of both what his greater potential would look like, as well as why he currently has the shortcomings he does. Um, but that really could have come through from any character. So, utility wise, Ebisu is definitely not unique. Um, and the one little positive, I guess, about Ebisu, in this arc is that briefly the shenanigans between him, Naruto, and Jiraiya are kind of amusing. But the unfortunate thing about Ebisu is that when he's around in early Naruto, he brings out the worst qualities of Naruto, and Naruto brings out the worst qualities in him. And every scene they share, well, all their dialogue, anyways, is just so obnoxious to watch. It is frustrating, and he really detracts from, I think, the entertainment value whenever he shows up. Whenever he's on screen, I just want him to get out of there. Uh, because yeah, Naruto is really at his worst in this arc when Ebisu is around, and I get why they act the way they do towards one another. Uh, Ebisu is characterized as not liking the little troublemaker, and Naruto is a troublemaker, and Naruto is characterized as not liking, the a well, who he understands to be a perverted man, but also someone who, like everyone else in the village, treated him like garbage, or like he wasn't worth anyone's time or anything. Uh, but making sense aside, it's not fun to watch for me. Uh, so yeah, we're I think it's not so bad as to be F tier. The scene is F tier. I don't know if Ebisu is F tier. Mm, I want to put him in F tier. He's going in F tier. Um, okay, Ibiki. His sole purpose is really just trying to build some tension during the written exam sequence. Um, we learn that he likes torturing people and he's cruel, I guess. But or he can be cruel. But like, whatever. We learn that the Leaf have torture specialists through him. I don't know. He's not much. Hayate. The fact that I even know the name of these tertiary characters is maybe a little concerning. But Hayate, uh, he's the exam proctor for the preliminary rounds. And he's basically just used as a plot device to determine when fights are over. I mean, every call he makes seems relatively reasonable, I would say, but basically it's just whenever Kishimoto decides, okay, yeah, that's the winning blow, we just have Hayate make it official. His death is used to further establish the sand as a threat. Rip Hayate, I guess. It does feel a little gratuitous, the amount of time we spend on his little spat with the sand for such a non-character, though. But I'll throw him above Misumi. Why not? Hayate. Or not Hayate. This guy was Hayate. Genma. Genma is just Hayate, but with a slightly different personality, and he doesn't die, and he's also around for the finals. I don't know. Genma, again, this is another character that I probably shouldn't even have tried to rank, but whatever. Um, so then we have Anko. So Anko is a fair ways more of a character than pretty much everyone else here so far, except for maybe Ebisu. Um, we get to learn the rules of the Forest of Death sequence through her. That's not really a character thing, that's just an exposition thing. But the way she communicates it and like the threat of the forest and everything, in a sort of, I guess, threatening, playful manner, with just a touch of seriousness, I suppose. Uh, we basically see that she likes to mess with the Genin, which gives her a little more personality, I think. I do think it is her messing with them and not her actually relishing in the danger that they're gonna be in, given how concerned she is later. When it seems that there is legitimate danger. Then again, no one even really bats an eye when some of the ninja turn up dead because obviously Kara kills multiple ninja um, in the Forest of Death. But you know, uh, killing in the Chunin exams was allowed. It was just basically we're gonna try and minimize it, I suppose. Yeah. I guess one could argue that uh, the establishment of yeah people can die uh, helps further cement how messed up the ninja world is. Um, so there's that. Her reaction to Gara as a seasoned Jonin helps characterize Gara as very impressive. So that's one thing she does, but I think the most important thing about Anko is that she is essentially the lens through which we get a better understanding of who Orochimaru is. Um, she is so fearful of what Orochimaru may do to the village that she tries to do a suicidal sacrifice, kill both of us type of move against him, which paints her as more heroic than her initial appearance, where she's, playfully threatening children. Um, so she's characterized as sort of playful and compassionate between those two things. Um, but yeah, because she is sort of lax to start, it does make her seriousness regarding Orochimaru make Orochimaru feel bigger. And the fact that Orochimaru is like this thing, like, okay, I have to die to kill him now before he does anything, uh, does help make Orochimaru's introduction a little more solid, portraying Orochimaru as more dangerous, more menacing, all that. So there's some good utility there. She has a bit of texture to her personality. She's more fun than a lot of these other Jonins in this first arc. I don't know if I higher end C tier. Like I want to say there's a fairly sizable gap between her and Asuma. I don't know. She doesn't get enough to do that I feel like putting her in B tier. Um okay, but next up we have someone who actually has some emotional weight, some meat behind him. Um this is where like the I guess you could say real characters start. Um when it comes to this. So Hiyashi Hyuga is Hinata's father, and he's a very major backstory component for both Hinata and Neji. Very important to both characters. Um, Hiyashi seems to be like a very major contributing factor to why Hinata is as shy and nervous and everything as she is. Um, which helps Hinata's behavior become very explicable. Uh, totally understandable and a little bit tragic. Um, so Hiyashi being uh, a very what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of harsh father figure. Um, it gives us a solid foundation for empathizing with Hinata, and it also makes Neji's hatred of the main branch of the Hyuga clan a fair ways more understandable, even if Neji is definitely not a likable character at this point of the story. He's not really meant to be. But likable and understandable are two different things, and Hiyashi helps us understand Neji's problems. Um, the first bit of characterization I recall for Hiyashi that portrays him as anything other than a terrible father and uncle, and just generally uh, rude, unkind man is when he sees how talented Neji is and thinks to himself, "Oh brother, if only you had been born first. You know, you should have been the one to inherit the clan." Um, this at least shows us that he is capable of acknowledging uh, the shortcomings of the main branch, and in sort of, I guess, in himself and everything. But at the same time, it does kind of, come off as like my daughter Hinata is so terribly untalented by comparison. Uh, it would have been better for everyone if Neji was the heir and not Hinata, sort of thing. Although I might be reading into that a little overly deep. But that's like the first sort of sense that I got that Hiyashi was an actual human being and not just, sort of guy who's just shy of being a legitimately abusive father. Um, yeah, and then later we get Hiyashi revealing the truth of Neji's father's, his brother, Hisashi's death. Um, yeah, and it isn't necessarily contradictory to his character, but Hiyashi suddenly choosing to act in Neji's best interest and reveal that Hiyashi himself originally planned to die um, for um, defending Hinata against the Cloud Ninja that tried kidnapping her. Uh, we yeah that he originally planned to die as he was the one who killed that Cloud Ninja to satisfy the Cloud Village. Um, it does feel the reveal that he did that, and also him telling Neji about it, feels like a fairly big leap for his character from the position he was in, like a very negative position, into this very positive action. Um, but in spite of it being a big leap, I do think that the moment where he tells Neji the story, um, and is sort of apologetic and sympathetic towards Neji, is emotionally effective. But mostly due to Neji and his father's side of things, not really due to Hiyashi's character too much. But like I said, it's not really contradictory for Hiyashi's character. It's just we didn't really get any positive setup for him previously. So it does feel like a sudden development, but I think that development being kind of sudden does help us put ourselves in Neji's shoes a little bit more in that situation. I think Hiyashi's the first B tier. He's used to effectively characterize other people and allow for stronger emotional moments with those characters within the arc. Um, yeah, solid, solid sort of tertiary background character. Hisashi, the brother who died in Hiyashi's place to prevent a war. Hisashi, I think, is the more emotionally powerful of the two characters. I find his story where, he grew to resent the main branch of the family, uh, and then also chose to die for his brother to be very emotionally effective. I think, it makes total sense why he would start to resent the main branch family, given that, the side branches of the Hyuga family basically exist to be sacrificed for the main branch's security and safety and stuff. And they're basically enslaved to the main branch, given that they're, cursed to, if the main branch wants them to die, they will just die and everything. Um, his hatred towards the main branch feels very justified, and you can empathize pretty strongly with Neji's dad. And the suffering he experienced due to being the side branch guy informs Neji's entire outlook on life and makes Neji's character very consistent and make a lot of sense. Um, but his choice to sacrifice himself for the sake of his brother, in spite of how the branch families are mistreated, feels very powerful to me. And I do love how he emphasizes that he is not dying to serve the Hyuga family, but to save the life of his brother. Very key difference there that shows that Hisashi, he loves uh, he loves the people in his life. He loves his immediate family and stuff. He just hates the system that the family has created. Uh, which I think makes for a sort of pretty well-rounded character for sort of just a backstory flashback character used to build others. And yeah, so Hisashi's story is really the root of who Neji is at the start of the arc, and the true story of what happened is the catalyst for Neji developing into a more positive character, or having his whole arc. Um, so yeah, it's good stuff. Well, it's sort of the secondary catalyst. First, it's Naruto beating him, and then it's learning the truth about Hisashi. I think Hisashi definitely goes above Hiyashi. Um, his role is small, but the entire role he serves is is like very good. So we'll put him up there. Um, all right, and now we have the sound team. Oh boy, I love the sound team. Um, okay, so first off, Keen. Keen is pretty lame. Um, Her personality is frankly just annoying, and as you can probably tell from my tone, I think the sound team are a pretty pathetic group of characters. Um, her failing to counter Sakura cutting the hair that she has grabbed to immobilize her, uh, when she could have preemptively started to grab her hands instead of her hair, or just like anything to more properly restrain or eliminate Sakura, makes Kin come off as extremely moronic. um I can't take her character serious after that, after she gets not beaten but outplayed, I guess, by a woman cutting her hair off. um it's a really dumb moment. Uh, the only really good thing she brings to the table is that she starts to get the ball rolling on some more of Shikamaru's characterization as an intelligent fighter, but no. Uh, D tier. I don't absolutely abhor any scene she's in, but she definitely makes everything worse. I think you could remove the sound team from the story pretty easily, or just have it have been one of them or something. Like, the only utility they serve in the story is giving some character to some other of the Genin, um and also establishing how corruptive Sasuke's curse mark can be. But I don't know, I feel like you could have done this with an entirely different set of personalities and it would have been better. uh Zaku also sucks. I think he's maybe even more annoying than Keen. Uh, his his flashback in the anime that he gets, which is, I believe, filler, wastes a bunch of time. So I'm mad at him for that too. Um, but one thing that Zaku has over Keen is that he gets majorly defeated twice in a way that is actually cool and satisfying. The first is Sasuke just breaking his arms uh, when the curse mark comes out, and I enjoy seeing Zaku in pain. A little bit of Schadenfreude there. Uh, So there's that. And then there's also Shino plugging up his sound hand palm hole things so that he sound blasts his own arm, uh, destroying it. I don't know, because we actually do get like a satisfying victory out of seeing Zaku get defeated, not once but twice. He's definitely going above Keen, I think. Because yeah, I'm not too satisfied by Shikamaru just bonking Keen's head, even though I do like Shikamaru and I like that bit. It's just not the same catharsis. Ah. Next up, we have Dosu, and Dosu is easily the best of the sound team here. He isn't an annoying character by any means. He's not exactly interesting or entertaining to me. But he is successfully depicted as relatively strong and competent. And later, when Gara kills him, it makes Gara feel more threatening. I think Dosu is better than 10-10. We'll give it that. Excuse me. Yeah. So then, next up we've got Choji. Choji is my boy. I love Choji, but however much I like Choji as a whole in the entire show, he isn't super well established in this arc. There's a lot of reoccurring like food and fat jokes. They get old very quickly. Sometimes they're amusing, but I'm more frequently annoyed by them. Um, the one little bit of good character work for Choji in this arc is that he has a very strong understanding of who Shikamaru is. He predicts correctly that Shikamaru will quit his match, even though everyone else has started to be impressed as Shikamaru subverted their expectations during the match. He starts, showing how clever he is and everything, and that when he does try, he can do very well. But Choji knows that as soon as Shikamaru gets tired, as soon as it becomes too much effort, he's just going to quit. And that just does really good foundational work setting up how good of friends Choji and Shikamaru are. Makes later emotional moments in the overall story more effective. But in this arc, it isn't much. Uh, I that being said, I can't stand to put him any lower than Asuma, or not Asuma, Kurenai. Because I love my boy Choji. If I was ranking him in the show overall, he'd be much higher tier. Um, but yeah, we can do C for Choji. Ino, oh no. uh, Ino is incredibly annoying and one note in this arc. And her only real purpose in the narrative is making Sakura an even worse character. Whenever she is around, any positive development Sakura has in the story is just immediately undone when Ino is on screen, as they just start bickering at each other, and it's super frustrating. I can only think of one moment, which is something of an exception, uh, and I will be touching on that when we get to Sakura. But for Ino, yeah, she really just sucks. Like, she has this whole backstory with Sakura where Sakura was getting bullied and Ino helps Sakura out and they become friends, and it's very touching and wholesome, and I would care about both characters a whole lot more if they didn't both just throw away the friendship because they had the same crush and started competing over him. That makes both characters seem extremely shallow, as they had a genuine, like, good solid friendship where they clearly cared about each other, and they threw it all away because they were attracted to the popular boy. Uh, just just makes both of them really hard to like. Very very unlikable characters. Um, very shallow characters. And yeah, she also has the worst fight in the entire series, which happens in this arc. Ino and Sakura is my least favorite fight in Naruto. Uh, it's really slow. It's really boring. Not much interesting stuff happens. The way Sakura gets shakes off the mind transfer feels weird and incongruent with how, like, we never see Sakura's little extra personality thing ever impact anything ever again. And the inner monologue Sakura has, I don't think was ever funny, and it also goes away later. And so the fact that it has an actual tangible effect in a fight makes it feel very incongruent with what happens with Sakura later. It's very strange, but yeah, I really hate Ino in this arc. Really, really hate Ino in this arc. She's very easily the worst character in the arc for me. Um, and up until this point in the show, she's my least favorite character in general. When we get to Shippuden, I end up liking her a lot better. Uh, but this isn't Shippuden. This is part one. Uh, One good thing I do have to say about Ina, though, is I like her English voice actress. She voices Tails in the Sonic movies, if I'm not mistaken. And she does have a good line read every now and then, even if her character really sucks at this point in the show. All right. So then we also have Iruka. So Iruka's kind of like a slow burn character for the overall narrative. Um, he starts the show as a very important character. Like in the prologue, he is very major. But after that, he only has like little moments here and there. Um, Now, these little moments tend to have a fair amount of emotional impact, especially as you get to know Iruka better and better and know Naruto better and better and how they sort of impacted each other. Um, so, like, um, these little moments can have a pretty big effect, especially later in the show. But I think his little moment with Naruto after the Forest of Death sequence is probably the weakest of these moments within the overarching narrative of the show. It's nice to see not Naruto, Iruka give a little lecture to Team Seven, um, but it's a little long-winded. Um, and Iruka beginning to see Naruto as a promising ninja instead of a kid that he has to protect, which happens in a scene that he shares with Kakashi and also in the Forest of Death lecture, uh, is a nice little, I guess, arc for Yuruka, but I think it's a much less compelling emotional moment than some of the other stuff we get later in the show, the comparable moments. But his overprotectiveness of Naruto does at least show that he continues to care about Naruto, which helps later emotional moments in the show land. So like I like Iruka here, but he doesn't do too much, and I mean Iruka's never been a bad character at any point, but I think this is arguably Iruka at his worst. Um, yeah, I don't think I can put him above Hiyashi. Um, later bits of the show, Iruka will get higher. I'm almost certain. But yeah, his moment's nice, but he's just I would say just good enough for B tier in this arc. So then we get to Gamakichi, and he's a funny little frog. I love him. I like his accent. I don't know why he's from New York, but he's a funny little guy. With that that bit when Naruto remarks that he's starting to hate frogs when he's getting really frustrated about continually failing to summon the stronger frogs that can actually help fight. Um, Gamakichi responds, anti-amphibian, eh? Well, take this, you big bigot, and he spits on him, and that makes me cackle every time. I really, I just really enjoy that exchange. And beyond just being a funny little frog dude, his presence in the Gara fight does force Naruto's character to go out of his way to save him from one of Gaara's projectile attacks, which Naruto, of course, does because of who Naruto is, and it's a nice little character moment for Naruto, showing him saving an innocent life and being a good guy, a little hero moment. Yeah, just a very short, brief character moment for Naruto that he gets there, um, which does enable one of my favorite little sort of thematic things that Naruto does, which is later when Gamabunta is summoned, Gamakichi convinces Bunta to help Naruto because Gamakichi was saved by Naruto, which means that Naruto is rewarded with the power to beat Gaara because of who he is and the fact that he chose to save someone, which is just a nice little setup, payoff, character moment that I really like whenever it pops up in Naruto. Um, and so I think Kichi goes here. I think it's a funny moment. Characterizes Naruto well. It's good. It's good. Good job, Gamakichi. Yeah. And then we get to Kiba. So this is both a good and a bad thing here. Kiba is initially characterized in a way that makes you want to see him get shut up due to how cocky and obnoxious he is. Um, he isn't like supremely annoying, but due to the pacing of early Naruto, his remarks get real fast to me. So I tend to get pretty tired when I watch the arc through of Kiba's character. I just like want him to get off my screen, basically. His fight with Naruto's okay. It isn't great, but it's okay. Uh, Kiba enables a little bit of characterization for Naruto, like his determination to keep getting up even when he keeps getting knocked down. But it's nothing new, and it's nothing all that powerful. So Kiba doesn't like you could remove Kiba from the Chunin Exams arc, and I don't think too much of value would be lost. He's shown to be observant during like the finals. He starts to realize that something seems off with all the Anbu and everything, which helps build tension. But you could have done that with literally any other Genin. So I don't think Kiva's character adds really anything to this arc. Um, we have a lot of cocky, overconfident characters in Naruto, and we have almost as many of those characters who look down on Naruto that Naruto could have beat up to proceed past the prelims. So I think Kiba is C tier at best. I'm actually gonna put him at bottom of C tier because I don't like him. I get tired of him. I don't think he like really detracts from the show, but I have mild negative feelings about him. So I would probably see him cut from the show if I had my choice. Um, this arc isn't quite Kiba at his best, I guess, but I don't find his best to be much better. So, yeah, that's Kiba. Okay then, Baki. So Baki is an intermediary between the sand and sound, like he's representative of the sand side in their relationship. And he kind of represents the sand's will and motivation. His ideas about how the Leafs peace treaty has harmed the Sand Village does serve as the primary justification for why the plan to invade Konoha. Um, and he's used to effectively build stakes by showing fear uh towards Gara and giving a bit of exposition regarding Gara. But Baki is very much a utility sort of plot device character rather than like a character. Um, better than Ten though. Yeah, Baki could just be kind of any sand guy, and things would be about the same. Okay, it is time for Kakashi. Now, I think I stated in my previous one of these videos, Kakashi is my favorite character in the show. I absolutely adore Kakashi. And I think he's very good in every arc. That being said, I think this is the arc, other than the one arc that he doesn't really even show up in, uh, where Kakashi is at his least important. He like you could it wouldn't be too hard to remove Kakashi from the story. That being said, under no circumstances would I remove Kakashi from the Chunin Exams because what little he does is really great in my opinion. Um, he has like these little key moments that keep him relevant here. So, first off, his relationship with Team 7 just continues to characterize him as a caring mentor. He has a lot of confidence in his team, which is nice. Just kind of shows that growing level of, trust and love in Team 7, which is good. Um, and his concern regarding the safety of Team 7 in this arc is expanded to all of the Genin. Like he shows concern for Lee. I believe he shows concern for a couple of the other getting. He shows concern for Hinata if memory serves. So, but basically, anytime any of the kids are in danger, Kakashi cares, which just further characterizes him as a good, solid dude. Uh, which is good in a mentor character. Um, and later, when Kakashi prioritizes training Sasuke over Naruto, makes perfect sense. Sasuke is in immediate danger. Well, relatively immediate danger because he has the curse mark on him that Orochimaru infected him with. And his first fight is going to be against Gaara, who is definitely going to try and kill Sasuke in the finals. Because Gaara is very unstable, very scary child. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. Sasuke gets the Chidori out of Kakashi, and I love the Lightning Blade, and the Chidori is also cool. So Sasuke getting that is neat. Yeah, his confidence in the students is endearing. Uh, that just continues throughout the whole arc, both at the start and towards the end. Um, and like I said, he shows concern over Lee when he is clearly in danger of being seriously hurt. And that's just, it's very touching. He initially reprimands Guy for training Lee in such a way that can put Lee's body in such peril. And that reprimandation makes sense because his immediate thought is, oh, he's caused this kid to like break his body to pieces so that he can pursue his dream. But then when he sees why Guy went that far, how much he cared about Lee, and how much he cared about Lee being able to pursue his goals and his dreams, he apologizes, and that just it feels that feels real to me. The way that when you see a situation, you might initially react one way, but then when you get a better understanding, your perspective changes. It's a good little moment for Kakashi. Very touching. I love his relationship with Guy. Um, they're friends, and I like their friendship. Seeing him and Guy tear through all of the enemies when they attack the stadium is rather fun. Just they have a little like counting game where they're competing with one another. Shows that they're helping the village while also showing that they are powerful and that this is a fairly low effort venture for them, even though it's important. And so yeah, that's all a very fun scene. Um, but what is handily my favorite bit with Kakashi in this arc is when Orochimaru comes to threaten Sasuke while Kakashi is trying to seal the curse mark and minimize the damage it does to Sasuke. Kakashi's first and foremost priority when this legendary evil ninja shows up who could definitely kill him. His first priority is protecting Sasuke, even if he knows the attempt would be hopeless. Um, you know, him and Orochimaru have that back and forth, and when Orochimaru starts moving towards them, uh, he then says, if you take one more step towards Sasuke, I'm not sure if that's the exact first part of the quote, but I do know that when he does get to the part of the quote where he says, basically, if you step towards Sasuke, one of us will die here. Um, is a moment that I find really cool. I love that line. Kakashi knows that if he tries to fight Orochimaru, he will die, but he will do his best to save Sasuke, even in spite knowing that. So yeah, one of us will die here. It might be my favorite line in the arc. It is just it's a cool line. He's using the lightning blade when he says it. It just perfectly characterizes Kakashi in terms of how he is this protective mentor person who cares deeply about his comrades. Um, and yeah, that determination just overrides his fear of Orochimaru. It's very lovely. Um, yeah, so I feel like if I was being fully honest, I would be putting Kakashi in like A tier, but I love Kakashi so much. He's, as I said, my favorite character in the whole show, and it would feel wrong to put him in anything less than S tier. I think that that line, "One of us will die here," uh, is, I don't know. I think that's an S tier line. I think that's a little S tier moment. uh, so even though he's not major enough that I think I'm fully justified putting him up there, I like that moment a lot. I like Kakashi a lot. He's going there. Um, so then we get to Jiraiya the Gallant, one of the most beloved characters in the show, for good reason, I would say. Uh, but first and foremost, I want to address the negatives regarding Jiraiya, which are kind of at their worst in this arc. His pervert shtick is something I don't like most of the time. Whenever, well, not maybe not most of the time, a lot of the time, I don't like it. When it's kept relatively tame, or when there's some sort of additional layer beyond his perversion in a given scene, then the scene will often successfully cause me to laugh or be endeared to Jiraiya in spite of his lechery or whatever else the scene is trying to accomplish. But unfortunately, in this first arc, there are a lot of scenes where the lewd humor and the perverseness just go too far, and the scenes are, instead of endearing or funny, they become pretty cringeworthy and at times uncomfortable. Which is really the only negative I have with Jiraiya's character, but it is a fairly major one. I think it gets dialed back as the show goes on, and it becomes a lot easier to, you know, ignore it, or even, like, I think in Shippuden his perverseness is actually fine when you get to that point. It gets dialed back a lot. It's no longer like uncomfortably so. It's more like a sort of, oh, you sort of moment whenever it pops up. Like if you have like a, it kind of feels the same way that if you like have a family member that has like a character trait that you would consider problematic, but like you still love him anyways. And so when it pops up, it's like, oh, that's him. That's what he's like. That's kind of what it feels like later in the show to me. But here, it comes off as gross, um, a lot of the time. Uh, like there are still jokes regarding the pervert shtick, which I think can be funny here. David Lodge does a really good job voice acting Jiraiya, and so he does comic deliveries very well, which saves some of those moments from feeling super uncomfortable. The Japanese VA also does a very good job with Jiraiya. Although I'm more familiar with Japanese voice actors working in Shippuden than I am in the Chunin exams. Um, but yeah, the voice actor kind of saves some scenes that would otherwise feel very uncomfortable or cringeworthy. Um, so that's one thing. Um, One joke that always lands for me regarding Jiraiya is when Naruto accuses him of being just some pervert, and then Jiraiya responds, "I'm not just some pervert. I'm a big one." um, I find that line, because there's an extra layer to the joke there. Besides just, oh, he's a perverted old man. The second layer there is that he is aware, and he also is aware that he is particularly perverted. Just extra perverted. The extra layer of self awareness actually makes the joke function. It's not just ha ha ha. Look at the funny, gross, dirty old man. Um, but yeah, aside from the perversion thing, Jiraiya's great. I love him. His relationship with Naruto is very endearing and also has some good solid comedy to it. This is, I think, the arc where the relationship's at the weakest, which makes sense because they just met. Um, but I think the dynamic's a little more compelling when you know who Naruto is to Jiraiya. And everything. Of course, you do kind of have to headcanon a little why they behave this way towards each other at the start, because I'm pretty sure Kishimoto didn't know the type of relationship he was going to develop between Naruto and Jiraiya, at least not fully. But you can headcanon your way into making everything make sense, which is something I tend to appreciate about Naruto, is that when something doesn't initially make sense, if you think about it hard enough, you can generally find a way to make it make sense. And so you don't really get too many like plot or characterization holes. It's just that sometimes the dots don't, the story doesn't always connect the dots for you. Although it connects a lot of dots for you at times. But yeah, it doesn't connect all of them. But yeah, no, yeah, they're dynamic. With like when Naruto's being an obnoxious brat towards Jiraiya responds in kind or comedically or with some level of like positive sort of like you don't get the sense that Jiraiya hates this little brat that he's with. You kind of get the sense that he's messing with this kid. Um and they're just both goobers, very goofy guys being goofy at each other and making fun of each other's faults. And so Naruto's obnoxiousness becomes something endearing when Jiraiya is around, or not obnoxious, brattiness, I guess, is a better way to phrase it, uh, because they play off of each other so well. Um, and also later in the show, when Naruto's less of a brat, it's just a very nice dynamic. But that's later, not now. Um, But yeah, there's also just very good setup in the second half of the arc for what Jiraiya would mean to Naruto in the story going forward. Getting that initial relationship sorted out, the fact that Jiraiya does seem to have some sort of relationship with the fourth Hokage, that when he knows he has to put Naruto in danger to try and unlock some of that power that he has, he tries to give Naruto a really nice and fulfilling day uh, before the danger. It's something nice. And Jiraiya comes off as very appropriately powerful, which makes sense. He's supposed to be an equal to Orochimaru. Um, and so yeah, like it's just very solid setup for what would happen later in the story. Some funny and endearing stuff. Uh, his training with Naruto is fun to watch. The way he's kind of goofing around while Naruto is trying his hardest to get the big frogs out. The way he pokes fun at Naruto, something I find very enjoyable. And so, despite this arc being where I consider Jiraiya to be at his weakest as a character, I have a very hard time preventing my feelings that developed later in the show, and regarding his later actions, and his just general character as a whole from influencing how much I enjoy his character here. So even though I think if I were to be um, less biased in my assessment here, I'd probably be more inclined to put him in like B tier or something. He's going in high A tier here. Yeah, Jiraiya is a character I adore, in spite of what I consider to be actual writing flaws with his character at time. Not character writing flaws, but just tonal and comedic flaws, I guess you could say. But yeah, he's a character I like a lot, so high tier character. Even in this arc where he's at his weakest. So then we've got Might Guy, who is, of course, absolutely central to Rock Lee's character and development. Um, their relationship is something I adore, and most of the positive feelings I have about Lee stem from how Guy interacts with him and sort of the attitude they have towards one another. And how Guy like loves and supports his little boy Lee here, who is definitely not related to him. um, I find comedy regarding Guy to be very funny. Like, he's a very good guy, very stand-up fellow, but he's also pretty dumb, um, which can lead to a lot of funny moments, uh, and such. He's a pretty unserious man whenever there isn't actually something important going on. And his friendship with Kakashi's great. Um, I love how his students, aside from Lee, think he's just some goofy guy, and they, tend to react, uh, like, comedically negatively to some of the shenanigans a guy tries to initiate. Um, so yeah, funny character. But I think the best part of Guy's character in this arc is either all those flashbacks where we see Guy building Lee up and trying to make sure Lee believes in himself and thinks that his dream can actually be attained. Very good stuff when he calls Lee a genius of hard work. I think it's an emotionally effective moment. But I really love the moment post Rock Lee versus Gara where Lee's arms and legs are, well, his arm and his leg are both broken. And we're told, his days as a ninja are over and all that stuff. He's very, very hurt and he needs rest. And, Guy turns around to see Lee standing up and he's not even conscious. He says, he's standing up just by sheer willpower. Or it might have been Kakashi who remarks that. But either way, when he sees how hard Lee is trying and how much hurt or how physically damaged he is by his efforts, and Guy just starts to sort of break down and grapple with the role he played in. He partially starts to break down and grapple with the role he played, but also just him breaking down because of who Lee is and everything he put himself through for the sake of his dreams. Like, it's a very powerful moment that tugs at my heartstrings. Um, just, yeah. So, Guy is a character I find to be very funny and also very compelling. Uh, Great dude. Uh, yeah. Even though I like Kakashi more than him, I think in this arc, Guy is far more essential. And has like multiple emotional moments, whereas Kakashi has one really cool moment. So I think Guy has to go above Kakashi. Uh, but I think, yeah, these two being right next to each other just feels correct. Um, and yeah, lots of people love Mike Guy, and I'd say for very good reason. He very much values like hard work and effort. He doesn't care how talented you are. He believes in you. Might Guy believes in you. You keep that in your head throughout your day. So yeah, Guy's great. Then we get Bunta. And Bunta's mostly a sort of set piece and narrative device, but he does have enough characterization to make the scenes he appears in to be, more fun than they otherwise would be. Um, he is very um aloof. Um and he sort of, you know, plays around with Naruto, uh, saying that he won't serve under him. He doesn't believe that Naruto summoned him, even though he knows Naruto did summon him, and he's just, kind of messing with Naruto and not acknowledging him for the sake of his own pride, as he says. And it's just a fun little dynamic of Naruto trying his absolute best to take this giant guy to take him seriously, and Bunta just having none of it. Um, and once he does lock in against Shukaku and Gaara, it's a lot of fun to see him cooperate with Naruto when they actually do work together. And it also makes it pretty satisfying to see like him work closely with Naruto. It makes it feel more like Naruto has earned what's happening, which is stuff that is good stuff. Um, Yeah, there is something I consider that like one could call a minor hole in his character, in that he is shown to be an ally of the Leaf, both in the past and the future. So his initial unwillingness to fight Shukaku seems a little out of character in the context of the series as a whole, but I imagine, again, headcanoning here, that he was basically just waiting for any opportunity to basically have an excuse to help the Leaf. He just wanted to keep up that sort of aloof facade in front of Naruto, given his own admitted sense of pride. So when Shukaku attacks him or insults him, Gamabunta would have probably attacked Shukaku. But within the context of the arc, his initial um, unwillingness to help does facilitate that moment that I mentioned earlier with Gamakichi, where Naruto saved Gamakichi. So he convinces his father Gamabunta, hey, Naruto saved my life against that guy. He was bullying me. You should help Naruto beat him up. Which means that Naruto's character is what allowed him to beat Gaara, not just his power. Which is some stuff that I like. Um, yeah, I am genuinely tempted to put Bunta up into A tier. Um, yeah, I think we're putting Bunta in A tier. I like him in this arc a lot. This is one of those characters who would probably rank lower in an overall character. Excuse me, in an overall character list, rather than higher. But in this arc, Bunta is solid, and this is also peak Gamma Bunta. He's not all that important anytime later, but yeah, Bunta's solid here. Then we get Mr. Kabuto. And the more I think about it, the more I feel like Kabuto is surprisingly unimportant in this arc. Um, his like narrative purpose, or like his purpose within the function of the actual story, that allows the story to unfold the way that it does, is that after Orochimaru's interference slows Team 7 down, um, Kabuto uh, is used by Orochimaru to make sure that Team 7 makes it through the Forest of Death so that Orochimaru can see more of Sasuke. Uh, which, is something that it makes sense for Orochimaru to do and everything, but you could rewrite the arc around removing Kabuto, uh, and you wouldn't lose too much, and it'd be pretty easy to make things go the way they did without Kabuto being there. But the twist of Kabuto being a spy for Orochimaru and how he helps Orochimaru through the show makes sense. It makes Orochimaru's reach feel greater and everything. So it's not like a it doesn't like do anything nonsensical. And I don't think you gain too much by removing Kabuto, at least in the first half of the arc. Um, Unfortunately, later, when his true personality is revealed, he becomes pretty unpleasant, but it also fits. He's a villainous character, and he's like Orochimaru's lackey. Um, Orochimaru brings up the idea that Kabuto's loyalty to him might not be true, or it might be fluctuating or something. It's never really paid off, though. Um, and in the second half of the arc, all he does is kind of stand there and be like, Lord Orochimaru orchestrated all of this, and I have stuck in as a sneaky Anbu guy, and you better watch out. We're evil and strong and stuff. And, Kabuto's pretty nothing in the second half of the arc, and in the first half, like, the twist makes sense and everything. It's telegraphed that, he's an Orochimaru spy. But you don't get attached enough to him for it to really hurt or anything. Uh so like it's very whatever. I think Kabuto is pretty whatever in this arc. I'm kind of tempted to put him in like a lower tier, like D tier, but I don't think he really detracts from the Chunin exams. Uh, I don't know. I think he's better than Kiba in this arc. What am above Kiba? I also might be mildly influenced by how later in part one I think Kabuto does kind of detract from things, and I have fairly negative feelings about early uh Kabuto before like the second half of the overall narrative, and like partway through Shippuden. Yeah, Kabuto's pretty nothing in this arc. So then we have Shino Aburame. So I think the first thing that comes to mind when I think about Shino regarding this arc is how well the narrative portrays his level of competence. He consistently remains a step or two ahead of both of the opponents he has in this arc. So we see him as pretty smart. He uses his bugs in tactical ways that make sense, that don't feel like too like out of the blue or anything. And so, because you get a sense of competence from him, I could very easily see people thinking he's a cool character. He doesn't have like a character arc or anything, but he's characterized fairly well as a pragmatic character, one who actively chooses to serve his village as he sort of independently joins the Gara pursuit team that was impromptuly formed by Kakashi. Um, Him having a vendetta against Konkuro for giving up before their tournament match and everything went south is fun and shows that there's a little more to Shino than one may assume from just observing his initial actions. But I think the best thing I can say about Shino is that this arc makes you want to see more of him, which is unfortunate because this is the arc where we see the most of him. So it's sort of a setup without payoff for the overall greater narrative. And because I know that, I think it does slightly damage my viewing of Shino over someone who is like maybe watching the show for the first time. Um, but I think Shino is overall a positive influence on the arc. So I think we're gonna give him low B tier. Yeah. Um. Okay, so then we get up to Sakura. And Sakura is both better and worse in this arc than she was previously. Um, her affection for Sasuke is generally less annoying here, and since she starts also showing some more concern for Naruto, it makes her feel a little bit more real. Dials back on how frustratingly one note she was. She feels closer to being a real person. Still not quite there, though, I would say. Um, yeah. Um, the show then starts to develop her desire to catch up with Naruto and Sasuke, which I think is compelling on paper. Uh, she feels pretty useless, and I think most audience members would see her as pretty useless at this point in the show. And so I think any person watching the show would see that she wants to improve, and it would make total sense to them. Uh, And so, yeah, on paper, that would have been very compelling. The unfortunate part, though, is that she doesn't really get any significant downtime to train or develop uh, from the start of this arc to the end of the Forest of Death portion of the story. After which, her desire to improve kind of seems to disappear, and it doesn't reappear meaningfully until after this arc. And so, it just kind of ends up being a wasted plot point for the Chunin exams. Um, And during this first half of the arc, her big moment is in the fight against the Sound Team, and it's not a particularly enjoyable fight. Um, she does demonstrate that she can be clever, but she also demonstrates that she is otherwise so incompetent that her intelligence is basically meaningless in a fight, which makes her it makes her useless like it's like almost nuanced uselessness. It deepens the feeling of uselessness, even though she does show a skill off. It doesn't matter how good that skill is. It can't help her. So that sucks. Yeah, because like she doesn't have any unique part of a like she doesn't have any unique kit, and she doesn't have any like good ninjutsu. She's not good at punching people or anything. It's just yeah, it just turns out very poorly for her. Um, and then she has a fight with Ino. And like I said earlier, that fight with Ino is the worst fight in the whole series. Any positive development regarding Sakura that made her a better character, maybe even like a C or B tier character in the Forest of Death, is immediately reverted during this fight. Um, she becomes a one note character obsessed with Sasuke, and like she does seem to have some motivation regarding non-Sasuke stuff, but it's definitely not the central focus from what I recall. And it just kind of caricature like turns her into a caricature. Uh because she shows through like the flashbacks and stuff that her obsession with Sasuke is so strong that she would cut off and sever genuine strong emotional bonds with her friends as her infatuation overpowers her care for the people around her. Makes Sakura seem really shallow. Um so yeah, it's quite bad. Her character in the Ino fight is shown to have been so shallow that it'd be an insult to puddles to compare their depths. Like it's nuts how how much damage the Ino fight does to Sakura's character, completely reverse coursing it for me at least. And yeah, like she does show significant willpower against Ino, but in the context, the source of that willpower and determination, it feels pretty laughable to me. And so yeah, it just doesn't work. The good part uh, of Sakura's character, at least in the second half of the arc, uh, post Ino fight, just try and start recovering the damage the fight did to her character. The first good part after that is when Lee is hospitalized and Sakura is shown to care enough about him to go check in on him and even buy him a flower. It's a pretty sweet little moment, especially since Lee has shown to care about Sakura a lot. She returns the favor. It's nice. It's one of those little moments that makes me not completely and totally hate Part 1 Sakura. Um, and later in the show, later in the arc, she gets damseled basically during the fight against Gara. And while I don't really care about Part 1 Sakura's safety all that much, I did at least care about Naruto and Sasuke's feelings in regards to her, so her being damseled does effectively build tension. Um, Although it basically removes her character from the Gara fight, um, which I think makes the Gara fight better because she's not around to drag it down. But yeah, Sakura, she actually has good moments unlike these two, so I'll put her top of D tier for now. I think she detracts from the show, but she has at least some positive qualities in this arc. But yeah, I really can't wait to get talking about Shippuden Sakura because she's so much better there. Um, but yeah, moving on from one of my least favorite Part 1 characters to one of my favorite Part 1 characters, we've got Shikamaru. And who doesn't love Shikamaru? Shikamaru is great. Um, when I was going through and thinking about how Chunin Exams Shikamaru works, I started to realize that we get this very nice gradual buildup, giving us a stronger and stronger picture of who Shikamaru is. And that I think is super duper well done in this arc. The first thing we learn about him is that Shikamaru is fairly irritable and quite lazy. So we get a pretty negative depiction of him at the start through Naruto's eyes. Uh, uh, well, through just kind of through sort of the general populace's eyes, actually. Um, But then we later get a nice little bit of characterization during the Forest of Death sequence, where he questions whether Ino is willing to let Sakura be killed when Team 7 is attacked by the Sound Team, and the pressure he applies to her kind of makes you second guess the quality of his character. You know, maybe he is better than just this lazy bones, irritable guy who doesn't seem to like being around people. Uh, and so you're given a negative foundation, and then you're given this sort of breadcrumb of heroic qualities that makes you open to the idea of starting to like him more and see him develop, which is, I think, solid stuff. Um, and it's Shikamaru's pressure on Ino that actually allows Team 10 to come in and help Team 7 before Lee gets there after Sakura fails to protect everyone. So we can attribute Team 7 survival to Shikamaru. Um, and then Shikamaru gets to showcase how incredibly intelligent he is when he fights Kin. He applies himself in a way that is very strategic. Um, and yeah, so whenever he tries, he is shown to actually be able to do quite well. He takes advantage of his positioning and the fact that he can force people to mirror his actions to have her hit her head when he doesn't, and it's good. It's So we're shown a little bit of heroism, and the fact that he thinks people ought to value their friends enough to save them, and we're shown that he is smart, and we get so yeah, um, which again just makes you more open to seeing him in a more positive light. And then I think the point where I think a lot of other people start to really like Shikamaru and see him as like sort of a rootable protagonist sort of person is when he shows himself to be a pretty considerate guy and a pretty considerate friend when Naruto and Choji get hospitalized during the month-long break between the prelims and the final exams. Um, we learn he visited Choji when he got indigestion, and he heard that Naruto was hospitalized due to exhaustion, and so he brings Naruto some fruit, makes sure he's okay. Um, and it's this nice little moment. Shikamaru's like I think only the fourth character from Naruto's class to show that he actually cares about Naruto, behind like Sasuke, Sakura, and Hinata, who have all at this point shown that they care about Naruto. And at this point in the series, that's a rather significant show of compassion, as at this point in the show, it's very well established that everyone hates Naruto, or at least most of the village hates Naruto. Um, and so Shikamaru, looking past you know the fact that everyone does hate Naruto, uh, and coming to visit him anyways, makes it really endears me to Shikamaru. And when you learn more about Naruto and Shikamaru later in the show, it makes this moment even more endearing, I think. And also, if you have seen any of the filler that shows like what kid Shikamaru was like, we learn that he never judged Naruto near as much as the other kids because he never saw a real reason to dislike Naruto and hate on him or avoid him. So he just treats Naruto like he treats everyone else, which is to say he's annoyed by everyone pretty much, but he also cares about everyone pretty much. He's a very chill guy. So yeah, very very endearing moment. I think, and I think it kind of alludes to the relationship Naruto and Shikamaru would develop later, where they become closer friends and trust each other and stuff. It's good. And then the two of them go endanger themselves to protect Lee against Gara, because after Gara hospitalized Lee, he wanted to finish the job essentially. Um, and it just further demonstrates that Shikamaru is a heroic guy who will choose to endanger himself to help people. And you get the sense he doesn't really know Lee that well, but he goes out of his way to save him anyways. Even though Gara is this super scary guy who Shikamaru uh, is fairly afraid of. Um, so you start to like him even more. And then he has his fight with Tamari during the finals, and it's a fun fight. Uh, the fight effectively demonstrates how intelligent both characters are. That Shikamaru is the more intelligent of the two, and it's pretty funny the way it ends with Shikamaru gaining the clear advantage, impressing the entire audience, and then just giving up anyways. Um, it's just that perfect sort of encapsulation of Shikamaru as this really smart and lazy guy who'll do as much of his job as he needs to and then dip. Um, yeah. And later, when Shikamaru is part of the sort of Gara pursuit squad, um, he chooses to be the distraction against the enemy ninja that are following them, and he fully believes he'll die. Uh, being the distraction, which demonstrates that he is a very loyal person, very heroic person, contrasted by his standard attitude. And I think that just is like what cements Shikamaru and his sort of basic foundation of characterization created in this arc. And, I think in addition to all that, his laziness makes for plenty of good comedy, and I feel like Shikamaru is a very relatable character. Uh, he's not motivated to do much. But he cares about other people and stuff. And yeah, no, he's a character that I can heavily relate to during sort of his comedic moments. It's good. What a drag is peak comedy. um, his little catchphrase. I love that. Um, yeah. Anyone I've watched the show with, we will go through a little phase where we just start quoting "what a drag" to each other in any situation where it fits even mildly. It's good stuff. Yeah, I also like how Naruto and Shikamaru choose to hang out a bit during the final exams, while they wait their turns respectively. Um, I think their dynamic is, Naruto is the sort of brash, energetic one, and Shikamaru is just tired, uh, but is kind of entertaining Naruto's antics just a little bit. It's nice. I like that dynamic a lot. Um, so where do I place him? So Shikamaru doesn't have any like incredible emotional moments or anything in this arc. He has a bit of cool factor. He's very entertaining. Uh, I really want to put him up here because I love Shikamaru. I feel like I could see any argument for him, or I could see an argument for him being in any of these three positive tiers. Um, but he greatly contributes to the entertainment value of the Chunin exams, I think. Uh, so, uh, I'm gonna put him in S tier, not because I think I'm correct to, but because I want to put him there. And I can at least mildly justify it the same way I can with Kakashi. So yeah, we're throwing him up there. So then we get to Shukaku, the one-tailed beast. Um, so Shukaku is mostly a contributing factor to Gaara's character rather than his own fully developed thing. But his presence as one of the central threats of the arc, as well as how he influences Gaara's character, very, very important. Uh, the build-up of him being the super dangerous entity is very effective, and the narrative does a very good job conveying to us just how difficult Shukaku has made Gaara's life. Um, and so, like, you can develop this sort of antagonistic relationship with Shukaku as an audience member, and also see him as the big threat that he's supposed to be, which is exactly what, is intended. And when his personality does briefly emerge during the Gara fight, he's pretty fun. Even if it doesn't quite match the menace that you might expect from the situation. He's more of a funny evil personality than a menacing evil personality. It is a very memorable personality, and it doesn't really undermine the threat at all, since at the end of the day, the main villain is still Gara. Um, and so it's sort of just this like fun little interruption of the edginess that Gara brings to the table. Um, but yeah, sort of, and Shukaku also allows for tons and tons of parallels between Gara and Naruto. It's good stuff. Um, Starting to realize I did not put the Nine Tails on this list. Uh, I forgot to grab an image of him. Uh, so whoops, I guess. I mean, he's not too much of a character in this arc. He's not super relevant. He's mostly a plot device, the same way Shukaku is. Um, so he also is just pure menacing evil. He doesn't quite have the same personality as Shukaku. But were I to rank him, I think I'd put him just like right below Shukaku in this arc. Obviously, later in the show, the Nine Tails is far more interesting and a better character. But within the confines of this arc, I think he's just one step below Shukaku. I'm gonna put Shukaku in A, because of how effectively he builds Gaara's character and the parallels with Naruto. And yeah, just pretend Kurama, the Nine Tails, is just right next to him there. Um, they effectively have very similar purposes. And yeah. Okay, so then we get to Konkuro. He's established as a decent little threat to the main cast. He contributes a bit of tension and menace. He's shown to be intelligent enough to outplay a ninja, Misumi, right here. His fear of Gaara helps further establish how scary and threatening Gaara is, which is good. Um, and his concern for Gaara right at the end of the arc is pretty nice. Um, as it does show that he does at least care a little bit about his little brother Gaara, but I don't know. I have a hard time really thinking of Konkuro as all that interesting or entertaining. I feel like he's mostly used as sort of this extra secondary character to just help establish Gara better. I don't, and his personality is just that he's a little bit of a bully and he cares about his sister, and we eventually learn he also cares about his brother. Very simple character, I guess you could say. But I don't think he's used in a super compelling way or interesting way. Um, his fight with Shino is good for what it is. But it's a fight between two relatively uh like unimportant characters. I have Konkuro up here in terms of relevance just because of his proximity to Gara. Um, and how he's used to build Gara. But that fight is it's sort of the secondary character fight where I'd say like some of the secondary characters are fighting. It feels, so um I don't think Konkuro has any particularly cool moments. He's just sort of, I guess you could say, a foundational character. Um uh That being said, I think he is used effectively in his sort of role in holding other characters up and just being a helpful part of the Sand family team. Eh, eh, top of C tier for Konkuro. That's where I feel like putting him. Yeah. So then we get to Tamari, and Tamari feels like the more nuanced and interesting version of Kankuro to me. She isn't like characterized too much more. She does. I don't know if she gets any more or less screen time than him, but it feels like they do a little more with her than they do with Kankuro. She's shown to be a little more intelligent than Kankuro. Similarly intelligent, or not similarly intelligent, more intelligent. Sorry, similarly powerful to Kankuro, and she fears Gara the same way Kankuro does. But she is shown to have some level of care for Gara throughout the entire arc, which makes her feel, like I said, a little more nuanced. The fact that she like cares about her brother at least a little bit, and also fears him, I think, helps characterize Gara better than just Konkuro's pure fear of Gara up until the end. Uh, because it helps establish that even if you do have a functional relationship with Gara, uh, he'll still hurt you. He still doesn't really care about you at this stage in his life. Um, so I think that just works better in that regard. I believe Tamari also, from what I remember, shows more hesitation than Konkuro upon learning about the mission to destroy the leaf. Which I think just, she's a more caring and sort of less brash character. It gives you the sense that she maybe values peace in people's lives and stuff a bit more than Konkuro. She sort of seems a little upset or depressed or concerned in those little moments between her and Konkuro where they discuss the plan and everything. Because Konkuro even comments on, like, if you had been able to be in a regular position, you wouldn't have to be here in this spot, infiltrating the leaf, ready to betray them and stuff. Um, so yeah, I think the utility Tamari serves is similar to Konkuro, and I think the show handles her better in the utility regard. But then, in addition to that, I feel like Tamari actually gets her own characterization that makes her feel like a character, and not just a utility character like Konkuro. Um, she has a spunky personality, and it works well both when she's an enemy here in this arc and when in later arcs she's an ally. Um, the her sort of cocky and arrogant demeanor against Shikamaru, alongside with her analytical mind. Uh, it's just sort of fun to see her fight against Shikamaru, and Shikamaru is more of a character than Shino is, so that fight ends up feeling a little more interesting. Um, and yeah, so she has positive and negative traits, whereas with Konkuro, I feel like it's 90% negative traits in this arc, and maybe just a little glimmer of positive characterization, whereas Tamari feels more mixed to me. I do got to give Konkuro this over her, though. Tamari's powers are pretty uninteresting, but since she only has one major fight, they don't really get old. It doesn't really matter too much. Um, so I think Tamari will go here in B tier, middle of B tier. Um, yeah, I like what little of her we get throughout the show, but it isn't. It at the end of the day, it isn't all that much. So then we get to Yashimaru. Yashimaru, doesn't exist within the current living time of the Chunin exams, kind of like Neji's father Hizashi. He died before, years before the arc even began, but he is a very key component of Gaara's backstory. And we learn, and we see that Gaara as a kid pretty much had no one except for his uncle Yashimaru, who, when Gaara was sad, would give Gaara, heartwarming bits of advice, tell him about how even though his mother died in childbirth, she loved him and will always love him and will protect him still through the sand. Um, and, he starts telling Gara about how, love is what will fix the hurt inside of him. Uh, and so you get the sense that Yashimaru is really the only person Gara ever had. And so when we see that Yashimaru tried to kill Gara and supposedly reveals his and Gara's mother's true feelings about Gara, where he says, "Oh, your mother hated you for killing her, and she hated this village, and she wants to protect you so that you'll, one day grow strong enough to destroy the village in revenge, not because she really cared about you. And I hate you because you took my sister away from me. I tried to love you, but I never truly could." Gara, as a fragile, I think, like 6-year-old, who only ever had one person who had a positive relationship with him, and that person betraying him, and sort of reversing all of that heartwarming advice and revealing that it was, or at least Gara believes that they're all lies. I can totally understand why Gara went nuts and started, killing and stuff. It's sort of the only thing he had to fall back on. He has a violent demon inside of him influencing him. He can't sleep ever, otherwise the demon will take over. And the only positive affirmation that he ever got was that his mother loved him, and now he hears his mother didn't love him. She wanted him to destroy. It makes total sense to me that he would just turn into this psycho who, kills people in order to validate his own existence, thinking that, hate is the source of strength and it's the only thing that can keep him going. Uh, and so, yeah, Yashimaru ends up being a big part of what makes Gaara's story so gut wrenching and compelling. Very, very good stuff, I would say. Um, and yeah, like later, like until the last arc of the show, this is what we understand to actually be the truth, too, and everything. So, yeah, I think Yashimaru goes pretty high despite being a flashback character. Um, yeah, I think above Hiashi or Hisashi and Hiashi, but yeah, um, yeah, very very central, very important character. That flashback gets me feeling sad every time, which is exactly what it was supposed to do. Okay, so then we're on to Hiruzen Sarutobi. Uh, and so Hiruzen's a character that we get a lot of revelations regarding long after his death in this arc. And those revelations can greatly affect how one views his character. So, like, those feelings that you have watching this arc for the first time may very wildly change on your second watch when you know more about him. Uh, so like his portrayal here can almost feel dissonant from what we learn about him later. And while I don't think anything we learn about him later and what he does now like contradict each other, um, it can feel strange, just kind of like tonally how Hiruzen is presented in some parts of this arc. Um, but like I said, like the character still makes sense in my mind. It's just that it's the emotions can feel a little off, I would say. Um, One thing that I think fits perfectly with his later characterization, post mortem, is that Hiruzen's given a little bit of gray morality during the exam prelims. He explains to all the Genin some of the realities of the shinobi world, and I don't think I see people talking about this too much, but he essentially admits to the Genin that they are tools to be used in international conflicts, both in peace and wartime. And, the fact that these Genin are children shows that Hiruzen has to have at least some level of acceptance regarding, like, necessary evils. And that is super in line with how Hiruzen is portrayed later in the series, given that he allows so many misdeeds to occur in the name of peace. Mostly just allowing Danzo to exist when we're later introduced to him. So that lines up really well, and I think that sort of little dark, concerning moment, which sort of thematically resonates with Naruto's attitude of, you know, not wanting to be recognized as a tool, but as his own person. Uh, in part one, is very thematically appropriate. And I think the moment lands better when you have more of those sort of negative viewpoints on Hiruzen's actions. Uh, Presented later in the show. Even later in the show, they don't put too much of the blame on Hiruzen, but the fact that he sort of allows that sort of darkness in the village to exist and to happen that we learn about later makes this moment, I think, hit a little different and hit a little better. Um, and his good qualities that are mostly what are emphasized in this arc still line up with later reveals. It's just on rewatch for me at least, it's strange to see how emphasized they are. When you learn how gray Hiruzen was and how many I think bad decisions he made. And speaking of bad decisions, it's actually made kind of consistent with later reveals that Hiruzen can make bad decisions in tense situations because we get that flashback of how he let Orochimaru go because he couldn't bear to kill his student who was clearly a very horrible evil man. Uh with like no redeeming qualities. So arguably that even lines up too. Um, but in spite of the relatively small amount of time given to establishing his relationship with Orochimaru, the relationship between the two is engaging when they speak to one another, and their fight is, for the most part, a big highlight of this arc. That is until the very last exchange between the two. That is dragged out for about 1,000 years. Where it takes like 15 separate cutaways for Hiruzen to finally finish dragging uh Orochimaru's arms out and deciding he can't take the whole soul, he's just going to take the arms. Um yeah. Uh and yeah, watching the fight I mean, I think the fight is good mostly for like animation choreography spectacle reasons rather than the characterization. I think the more character driven fight in the climax is Naruto and Gara. But this fight's still very cool. And Hiruzen's more heroic qualities play a fair amount of part in it. So it still works to service Hiruzen's character. Um, and while I don't love Hiruzen's character from an overall perspective, I like him well enough, and seeing Orochimaru have a meltdown as Hiruzen disables his arms while he drifts off, like falling into unconsciousness and eventually death, um, unable to hear Orochimaru have his meltdown where he's just, yelling at him like, "You stupid old man, how could you take my arms?" And Hiruzen's mind and senses start to leave him, and he's only able to see Orochimaru as the child he once trained, is a pretty satisfying send off to Hiruzen's character. It's also just kind of funny to see Orochimaru freaking out, trying to insult Hiruzen, and Hiruzen literally can't hear him. And his little speech about the village's strength is a nice bit of thematic work. How everyone derives their power from wanting to protect the other villagers and stuff, and how he derives his power from viewing the village as his family and stuff. So yeah, I think Hiruzen is, I'm gonna put him like top of B tier. Um, I think even without the muddying of his character post mortem, I don't think he goes too much higher than that. I never like cared too much about his character, but it's solid. It's good. It's good. He has a lot of good strong moments in the arc. Um, Hinata Hyuga. All right, good old Hinata Hyuga. It took over 45 episodes of Naruto. I think it took like 47 specifically. But when the show finally focuses on Hinata, we finally managed to get ourselves a compelling female character in Naruto. um, with Hinata. Um, Hinata throughout the show gets three really, really big moments. Even though she doesn't otherwise do much, those three big moments throughout the show land really well for me. I think they're emotionally effective, tug at my heartstrings sort of moments. And This arc contains one of those three big moments within the overall narrative. And yeah, so whenever Hinata gets spotlight, I think her character works very well. Um, and this is sort of the foundation of her character, which hard carries her for the rest of the show because we don't get too much development out of her beyond this first big moment. Um, but I think it's done so well that I am able to continue to care about Hinata throughout hundreds of episodes of television, in spite of her lack of development later. So I think that just speaks to how well done she is in this arc. Um, yeah, so her background as the disappointing and relatively untalented heir to her clan is one that greatly endears me to her, like right off the rip when we finally start learning about her. Her lack of confidence, shy demeanor, all make total sense given her background. And it also gives her a very compelling reason to have developed a strong admiration for Naruto, who is similarly untalented and considered unimpressive, but also has that determination required to never give up on anything, and to keep trying. And so he becomes a very strong source of inspiration for her. Makes total sense. Pretty simple and straightforward, but very compelling and strong stuff, I'd say. Um, and we learn all of this during her fight with Neji. And when she fights against Neji and does her best in spite of her knowing that the odds are low, it always really makes me want to see her succeed. Like, I just, she's this adorable kid that I want to see succeed and be happy. And so I always end up really rooting for her, even though obviously I've watched the show and I know Neji wins and absolutely beats the tar out of her. Um, and when not Naruto, when Hinata starts to lose against Neji and Naruto starts, yelling and trying to motivate her to keep going, and it motivates her to establish her ninja way to be the same as Naruto's, where she never goes back on her word and she keeps trying. It's a very strong moment for both characters that made me like both of them more. Just building characters off of each other in a very nice way there. Um, and well, keeping you rooting for her. And her personality is very pleasant. She's very sweet. She's the first character we ever see sort of like positively affirm and care about Naruto. Even in that little moment in episode one, before we see how much Aruka cares, we see that, Hinata's like, Naruto, do your best. And because of how hated Naruto is, seeing Hinata care about him, uh, immediately helps you see her as a like kind, empathetic character who, basically if you like Naruto in these early stages when everyone hates him, it makes it a lot easier for me to like you as a character. Uh because you are empathizing with the person everyone hates, and you're able to see him for who he is and not just like the Nine Tails, or like the failure or what have you. Um, so that in conjunction with her backstory just makes me really like seeing her on screen. There are funny bits regarding her like shyness and lack of confidence, but it never feels like she's being demeaned. It's just, character comedy that doesn't come at the expense of the characters. Naruto's an idiot, and so when he accidentally says something that could come off as mean, it's funny, and then he immediately affirms Hinata after, and it's nice. Um, I just in a show where in like these first couple of arcs all the characters are like high energy or on a moral high horse and can come off very obnoxious, Hinata being just this pleasant personality I think makes her a highlight. And I just enjoy having her in any scene, really. Um, yeah, and the fact that she is so likable and that you really start rooting for her in the Neji fight helps ensure that you really want to see Neji take. No, you really want to see Neji taken down by Naruto after he nearly beats Hinata to death. Like, it always hurts to watch that sequence. And I like Naruto's response to it. Um, so Hinata, I think similarly to these other characters up here, not like the most major character in the arc, but what she has, I really do love. Even if it's really just one big moment. And so I'm gonna put her in S tier. Every scene she's in is good. She has an S tier moment. Nothing she ever does detracts from the show. Great character. Um, yeah. Feels kind of wrong putting her above Shikamaru, but this isn't Shikamaru's arc yet. We haven't gotten there, so uh, yeah. So then we get up to Rock Lee, the handsome devil himself, as you know he would say. Um, and Lee is utilized very well in a number of ways. His relationship with Guy gives both of them a very strong characterization. You know, Lee is trying his hardest to achieve his dreams, and Guy sees that in him, and Guy used to be the loser like Lee was until he trained hard and proved himself, and he wants Lee to be able to do the same. And Lee's lack of confidence allows Guy to build him up by saying, you have to believe in yourself or all of this will be for naught. Um, and, his determination is a very endearing part of his character, I would say. His introduction, while not definitely not my favorite part of his character, not I don't think it's the best introduction or anything, does successfully characterize him as someone who like wants to test himself and wants to improve, which is sort of the foundation of his motivation. And his intervention in the Sakura fight gives him a little bit of moral fiber. The fact that it's motivated by a crush rather than just by the fact that someone's in danger and I should help, I think weakens the moment a little. I think it would have been better if Lee just valued Sakura as a human being and not as a crush. I think that would have helped me endear myself to Lee earlier and more strongly. Uh, but it is what it is. And they're it's not like Sakura ever returns her feelings to Lee. So it kind of goes nowhere. So I would cut that if I had a choice, but it's still fine. But yeah, we get just I'd say a relatively shaky foundation of who Lee is in his first two scenes or bigger scenes, his introduction and the sound fight intervention, but they are positive traits, a loose collection of little positive traits that get built upon much more strongly later. Um, but I don't really start to like him all that much until the Chunin Exams prelims, where he becomes a much better character in my mind. His first moment that I really like from Lee is when he sympathizes with Naruto's feelings regarding putting Neji in his place, and I guess you could say avenging Hinata and stuff. Uh, the fact that he's able to see where Naruto is coming from and everything, I think makes Lee more likable. And his desire to challenge Neji reinforces his whole underdog narrative. And of course, his fight with Gaara is one of the highlights of the arc. Um, I probably have that fight ranked a little lower than most people do, but it's still definitely in like my top tier Naruto fights list. The S tier, highest tier, whatever you have. And it's a really great fight. It's and the emotional weight of it is primarily driven by Lee's character. Gara being this like big wall is important, but Lee's sort of underdog tenacity is more important. Uh, and so Lee is really the one who makes the fight. Um, his progression of power as he, takes off the weights, and we see that they were so heavy that they caused the ground to like explode basically when they land on the floor. Uh, you know, that was the moment where I suddenly started taking Lee seriously because it's like, oh, okay, this guy's work has paid off. We're on business now. Uh, and so that's sort of like when I started taking him seriously, and then he starts actually putting work in against Gara, and it's really good. And we start to get the flashbacks to when he started feeling uh not very confident in himself, and Guy supported him, and it's very touching. And then we get to the gates, and the gates are really cool. The Again, that sort of sheer determination to prove himself is something I find endearing, even if it's not the smartest move for one's long-term health. To open those gates and risk hurting yourself in order to show your merit. uh, the desire to show one's merit is, I think, a very relatable motivation. um, and so yeah, that fight, really really good highlight of the show. My favorite bit of the fight itself isn't actually really any of like the choreography or anything. I think the parts that make me love that fight as much as I do is the flashback we get midway through that I just talked about, and also the aftermath of it when it looks like Lee has a career-ending injury, and like I said, the moment where Guy reacts to the state Lee is in. Again, I find it pretty heart wrenching. Guy's reaction to it, but also just the fact that Lee was so determined and cared so much about proving himself that he put himself in that situation is that's a concept that I think that kind of hurts a little to see. Uh, Someone endangering themselves over that. So it's a pretty powerful moment, I would say. Um, Although one thing I do got to say, I'm not a huge fan of his dub voice. It's not like the voice actor is doing a terrible job or anything. It's just the way his voice sounds sometimes makes it harder to take him seriously, even if the actual emotion behind the voice is in the right place. Uh, it's not a terrible dub job by any means. It's just for me personally, it kind of makes it harder to take things seriously. So my preferred language when watching shows is generally English, but when it's a Lee moment, I will typically switch to Japanese. Uh, in fact, Naruto is one of very few shows where, if you ask me, I would say that I overall prefer the Japanese more than the English. But the English performances do matter to me, uh, even if I can choose Japanese because English is my preferred language. Um, that's really not a character writing issue, and I'm not going to hold it against him too much here. Uh, yeah, because Lee only has sort of like one S tier moment, and it's that fight. It's that the whole sequence of fights. Like I am tempted to put him high up in S tier. I think he probably deserves to be up here, but I just kind of find him just a little bit annoying and obnoxious at times. Uh, where I think he damages the tone in a couple of scenes. Uh, I'm not sure if that's really Lee's fault or just the tonal issues that I have with Part One Naruto. Like, I think if I were being more objective, I would have Lee higher up here. I think some people would call it blasphemy to have Lee below Shikamaru and Hinata in regards to specifically the Chunin exams, if not the overall narrative. And as I said, I think my favorite bits of the fight really are derived from Guy's characterization, even though Lee's character plays a really big part in it. And I do think they could have done a better job to set Lee up as a more positive character before his big moment. And after his big moment, he doesn't do too much. So, even though it might be inconsistent with some of my previous logic, I feel like Lee should be here for me personally, even if I think objectively maybe he should be higher. uh I think A tier at top of A tier is how well Lee contributes to my enjoyment of the arc on a personal level. Um so then we get to Neji Hyuga. Um and Neji is I think a very well written character in this portion. Uh he has a lot more complex stuff going on than say someone like Lee. Um Although he's very unlikable at the start and he's supposed to be and everything. And his whole worldview that gets proven wrong and everything is set up well, I think. So yeah, Neji kind of serves as both a good antagonistic force and as a solid character who undergoes positive change and has his own little arc in this story. His fight with Hinata is where we get a lot of that initial characterization, and we see him as a very intensely bitter and pessimistic person. He's also fairly arrogant and seems like he's pretty full of himself. And the belief that he shows that no one can ever truly change and everyone's fated to just be, as you know, like if you're born a loser, you are a loser sort of attitude. He believes very strongly in fate. It's something that really gets on your nerves, especially if you empathize with either Naruto or Hinata within the show. Um, and I know I, at the very least, wanted Naruto to beat the absolute crap out of him uh, during his introductory sequence. He is well established as very skilled and manages to be a rather imposing threat to Naruto's like progress. Um, and um, you know, when we get his half of the story as to what happened with his father, where he only knows about the cloud attacking Hinata, but they didn't acknowledge that they attacked Hinata, and one of their Cloud Village people was killed by Hiyashi. Uh, and so, Neji knows that his father died in place of Hiyashi because they were twins and could serve as an adequate body double, so as to prevent the Cloud from the diplomatic relationships with the Cloud from falling apart. It makes a lot of sense why Neji would be so bitter and everything. Uh, and so he definitely works as an understandable yet hateable character who feels like he might be a significant obstacle for Naruto. Um, and as I said before, his fight with Hinata characterizes both of them very well. Uh, and you want to see him get beat. And I think that fight with Naruto drags quite badly. I'm not a huge fan of the fight itself. Uh, the way he gets beat is rather satisfying, and while I don't care for the fight itself too much, the way both characters interact and just act in general during the fight, I think makes sense for both characters. Um, and so there's no real character writing problems in the fight. It's just that the fight itself drags. And yeah, it's satisfying to see Naruto outsmart him and overpower him. Uh, and because of the way Naruto beats him and what Naruto says throughout the fight of how like Naruto doesn't accept that he will always be a loser and that he has to be able to improve and that he'll prove it by beating the genius Neji. It puts Neji in the sort of right mindset for his growth later in shortly after the fight, where we learn about Neji's father, uh, which is, as I said before, an emotionally effective story, and his realization that he can choose who he wants to be, um, is something that I liked a lot and thought was fairly powerful. And I'm also of the opinion that Neji's narrative is not contradicted or damaged by later events in the story like a lot of other people do. I understand why some people think that Naruto's increasing level of supposed specialness retroactively hurts this narrative, but I disagree. I might get into the why of that when I do like if I ever get around to reviewing the arcs like I want to. Um, yeah, I think Neji is a very solid character here. Um, I don't think he has any sort of S tier emotional hurt compelling moments for me, but he has several A tier sort of moments, and while I find him sort of annoying, I think you're supposed to find him sort of annoying, so that's more of a positive than a negative. I'm gonna slot him right below Jiraiya. Mm, no, he can go next to his dad. Uh, yeah, very solid character. Not one of my favorites, but very good stuff. Um, yeah. Okay, so Sasuke. Sasuke, I think, is a lot more important. Well, I'm not sure. Maybe more important than he is in Land of Waves is the wrong way to say it, but I think he's definitely an improved character over how he was in Land of Waves. We get more glimpses into how much his hate for his brother motivates him, and it's good setup for his actions later in the story. And since we don't get an explanation as to the full story of what happened to Sasuke and his clan and what Itachi did to it, other than we know that Itachi killed all of them. Um, Seeing how much it motivates Sasuke, I think does prime the audience to want to see more of Sasuke's backstory. Um, so I think that's good. And seeing him start to become genuinely afraid to lose his friends in the Forest of Death, I think makes him a lot more of a compelling character. Even if he still acts rather unpleasant outside of stressful situations, the fact that he now shows open care for Team 7 in those actual dangerous situations rather than hiding it up until the point of self-sacrifice like he did in the Land of Waves, I think makes him a lot more compelling. I root for Sasuke a lot more in this arc. I don't mind seeing him near as much when he's at his worst in this arc, and I like seeing him at his best more. Uh, when he finally acknowledges Naruto as an opponent, it's a nice little moment. Again, Sasuke sort of acknowledging Naruto as someone worthy of his attention. Any sort of positive affirmation for Naruto coming from another character at this point in the story makes me like them more. Because even though Naruto is still an absolute brat at this point in the story, he's gone through a lot. He's trying his best. He's very empathetic. He's a lot of good qualities to him, and people starting to see that in Naruto makes me like them more. His fight with Orochimaru is really well made and fun to watch. Him being terrified at first makes sense because it's Orochimaru, even if he doesn't know who Orochimaru is. And him being motivated by Naruto's actions is good stuff. It makes it make more sense why he later acknowledges Naruto. Uh, and when he gets the curse mark, and he has this little moment of sadism against the sound team, it's a pretty cool moment. It's also concerning, which it's supposed to be both those two things, so that's good. We see that Sasuke very much has the potential to become a darker and more vengeful character, which is good setup for later stuff. And then we successfully see him fight off the curse mark. showing how strong his will is, and it's cool seeing Sasuke on the bass foot, blah, back foot. I don't want to have bass foot. That seems like it'd be very difficult to walk. um, but yeah. So Sasuke's characterized in a way that makes his future actions make more sense. I think here, which is good. Setting up parallels between him and Gaara is cool on a thematic level, even if like the narrative itself doesn't do too much with it. Um, Gaara's character does some stuff with it, but like we never really see Sasuke explore Gaara's situation the same way Gaara explores Sasuke's, or Naruto and Gaara explore each other's. So definitely feels like the sort of rapport, I guess, between the two characters isn't quite there as much, other than just Sasuke seeing Gaara as a strong opponent he needs to beat. Um, but it's still a cool parallel. Um, because if Naruto and Gaara are similar and Gaara and Sasuke are similar, then I think we can see that Naruto and Sasuke are similar, which is something that gets a lot more focus later in the show. Um, yeah, his fight with Gaara is a lot of fun to watch. And we get a lot of hype around Sasuke's power, and we get some cool moments in that fight. But it also builds tension effectively, as we know that Gaara is very unstable at this moment. Um, and that being paired with how hard Sasuke is pushing him could lead to disaster. It's a good moment for both tension and cool stuff within the greater narrative. And then Sasuke pursuing Gaara makes total sense for his character. He wants to finish the match. He also, wants to follow orders, complete the mission, prove himself, serve the village, all that good stuff. Yeah, and Sasuke feeling desperate to protect his friends against Gaara in particular had me putting myself more and more into Sasuke's corner. I think the line is something along the lines of, I don't ever want to have to lose my treasured comrades ever again. Something like that. Uh, so yeah, just more good guy Sasuke to get you to care about him more before the later events of the story. Good stuff. And his surprise at Naruto's fight with Gaara and how large the scale gets is both kind of amusing and also solid setup for the feelings of inadequacy he would start to develop in regards to his own power. So yeah, when I watch the arc, I don't. I still kind of don't. I feel like I'm for some reason naturally inclined to like Sasuke less than I should. Um, I don't know why, but when I'm like actually watching the show, unless it's one of those like super good Sasuke moments, I find myself not as compelled by them as I feel like I should be a lot of the time. But I also feel like with each rewatch of the show that I do, I like Sasuke more as a character than I did on my previous watch. Um, and so while I have memories of not really liking Sasuke in this arc as much as thinking about it as how well he is written during this arc, I, on my most recent watch through, found pretty much everything regarding Sasuke to be pretty engaging. And so I think I'm gonna throw Sasuke in the A tier. He doesn't have like the most emotionally powerful moments in this arc or anything. But there's some good stuff going on with him. A lot of good foundational work that I really like from a writing perspective. So I was thinking when I was writing this stuff down, these little notes that I have to make sure I get through all my talking points, that I'd maybe be putting Sasuke at like the top of B. But the more I think about it, the more I feel like Sasuke should be an A, even just talking about my own subjective enjoyment and not on like an objective level. Uh, so yeah, I think Sasuke's actually done pretty well in this arc. The more I think about it. Um, then we get to Orochimaru, and Orochimaru is a pretty simple character. You know, he's like the pure malicious sort of unsympathetic evil. And the show does a very good job of setting him up as a very powerful, very threatening villain. You know, it starts with him playing around with Team 7, and then showing complete superiority over Anko, and then scaring the hell out of Kakashi and having him admit that had they fought, Orochimaru would have easily killed him. Uh, Kakashi being one of the most powerful characters in the show that we know of at this point, I think second only to Hiruzen, really, and now second to Orochimaru uh, as well, so third. And then fourth because Jiraiya and such. Uh, but, you know, he's still very high up there. And so Kakashi being scared of Orochimaru makes Orochimaru scary. Um, and yeah, his power in conjunction with his very malevolent personality and total lack of morals makes him a very menacing character who you can genuinely buy the threat of. We later learn that he killed the Kazekage, which means that when he fights Hiruzen, you know, it becomes a very real possibility in our heads that he kills the third Hokage because he's already killed a Kage. He's that powerful. And of course, he does kind of end up killing the third Hokage. Yeah, well, yes and no. The third Hokage did a suicide attack, but basically, he's a big enough threat that Hiruzen dies, and it makes total sense. So that's good stuff. Steve Bloom does a great job voicing him in the dub. Um, really sells the menace and the amount of fun that Orochimaru is having being evil. And said amount of fun he has with his villainy is something I find very entertaining about Orochimaru. Um, like Orochimaru is by no means my favorite Naruto villain, but I think having this sort of pure malevolent evil that exists in part 1 is a solid uh contrast to all the sympathetic redeemable villains we get throughout the show. So I think Orochimaru's very existence makes them feel a little less repetitive, which is good because those are, I think, the villains that have the most effort and good writing behind them. Everything you learn about him just makes him feel more and more repulsive. Like, you know, the way he revives the first two Hokage to fight Hiruzen, you know, people Hiruzen cared about, and, you know, how he's basically trying to invade Sasuke's body and everything. It makes him feel like everything he does is some sort of violation against nature, which is exactly what you want out of Orochimaru. Um, so, you know, as he's that pure evil, gross villain, he's very hateable in a good way for the most part, anyways. And him losing his arms as his motivation is essentially to learn all the ninjutsu in the world and become this like immortal academic, no matter how many people he has to sacrifice to get there. Him losing his arms and therefore all of his jutsu, making all of that knowledge worthless, feels like a very satisfying and proper fate for him at the end of the arc. Even if, of course, he expresses hope that he can get them back and everything, and continue to be a threatening villain. But yeah, simple character, but very effective as the less sympathetic of the arc's two villains. I think Orochimaru going right above Lee. Um, this A tier is bigger than I thought it would be when I started making this. Uh, yeah, okay, and then we get to Gara of the Sand, Gara of the Desert, and I think Gar's characterization is basically perfect throughout the arc. He's depicted as very threatening and powerful, but not quite entirely invincible, as we see that people are able to outspeed him, do a little bit of damage to him. We get like an escalation of how hurt he can be, which I think is a good spot for your villain to be in. Very difficult to beat, but the audience is not convinced that it would be impossible. Perfect place for, I think, your primary villain. Uh, and the Shukaku inside of him is set up very well as sort of an even bigger threat, which means that even when Gara seems fallible, the tension can still be kept up. As we don't know quite the extent of Shukaku's power. And his absolutely psychotic behavior throughout the arc makes him a pretty scary villain. Same, similarly to Orochimaru, he's sort of the intimidating villain for the younger characters, where Orochimaru is the intimidating villain for the older characters. Um, I love how, not even intentionally, he ends up really getting in Naruto's head. Uh, as Naruto gets to have a stronger understanding of who he could have been had he not formed the bonds that he has with his friends and with his mentors. As Gara, like Naruto, had a demon put inside of him, was ostracized, everyone hated him. But unlike Gara, Naruto was lucky enough to find people who cared about him and acknowledged him, which allowed Naruto to become who he is today. And so that sort of start of the parallels between them that are acknowledged in universe by Naruto himself, starting in the second half of the arc, is good stuff. I like how Naruto has sort of a different fear of Gara than a lot of the other characters do. Where other characters fear Gara purely from a physical and practical perspective. Naruto also has a little bit of that fear, but he also has sort of this secondary fear that comes from the realization that him and Gara, could have easily become the same person. Um, which I think is a strong showing for Naruto's empathy and Gara's sort of menace, and also starts to plant the seeds of how tragic Gara's character is. Um, and like I was talking about with the Yashimaru segment, Gara's backstory perfectly explains his behavior. It made me feel very badly for him, in spite of how horrific his actions throughout the arc are. Um, and I do love how he becomes so fixated on Sasuke, due to Sasuke's obsessive hatred. We learn that Gara strongly believes that power stems from hatred and solitude, as he was convinced of that due to Yashimaru's betrayal. And so Sasuke is the only one he sees as an opponent truly worth his attention. Which then later gets subverted when Naruto ends up being his greatest opponent, in spite of the fact that Naruto is motivated by his love for his friends rather than hatred. And so it ends up making sense that Gara would want to show that Naruto's motivation is worthless. Um, and it makes sense that Naruto beginning to outplay and overpower Gara would make him very desperate to win and prove his own worldview correct, because the only thing that keeps Gara stable, the only thing that keeps Gara going, is the idea that he has a purpose in his life, and his purpose in his life, given to him by his mother, is to be that killing machine. Uh, and that's the mindset that he tragically adopted when he was very young due to all the factors in his life. And so having that worldview challenged starts to break Gara down. Thematically, I love that Naruto and Gara are both able to tap into similar levels of power. Uh, but Gara achieved this by giving in to hate and allowing a monster to control him, rather than Naruto's method of cooperation and learning, which allows Naruto not only to beat him, but Gara is also able to see that, or well, we the audience are able to see, and I think later Gara is also able to see that Naruto is demonstrably more happy than Gara. Uh, and in spite of Gara's mindset, and how absolutely psychotic he is at this point in the story, between the way he was traumatized and how Naruto shatters his worldview by overpowering him, I was fully convinced by Gara's change of heart when Naruto showed him empathy. Because in spite of how extreme Gara was, um, basically the entire reason he was the way he was is because the one person who ever had showed him empathy betrayed him, and so he was lacking that true feeling of acceptance or acknowledgement from anyone else as anything other than a weapon. And when Naruto asks, it hurts, doesn't it? That solitude and that pain, uh, I know it well. Uh, I think it makes total sense to me that Gaara would be receptive to that because he doesn't have like a personal vendetta against Naruto. He doesn't have a personal hate for Naruto. He has a personal hate for everything in general. But at the end of the day, he's a lost and a scared child who just wants validation for his existence. And so I think empathy, even if he doesn't understand it at first, kind of gives him a little dose of that. And but when Gara tries to, still keep his worldview and asks, like, yeah, or still has that perspective of like, where's this guy's strength coming from? And then Naruto says, basically like, those people, they rescued me from my loneliness, which is why that if you continue to try and threaten them, I'll stop you, I'll beat you. Gara, it clicks in his head that this person who just beat him, uh, is able to get all of that strength from love and from bonds. Um, and he realizes that if he starts behaving more like Naruto, he could maybe have these bonds and, try and derive strength and joy from them. It's a very quick arc after an entire arc of Gara being the psychopath. But I find it very convincing and compelling in spite of that. It makes perfect sense to me that Gara would change that in that moment. And it's still satisfying because Naruto expended so much effort to try and beat Gara and everything that his change feels earned. Um, Partially by Gaara's own tragedy, but also by Naruto's efforts. Um, so yeah, and each of Gaara's fights are really good. Obviously, the Lee fight I talked about earlier, one of the most iconic fights in all of shonen anime, beloved for a reason. Really good stuff there. Even if his character is the character being focused on less in that fight. His fight with Sasuke, like I said, cool, good at building tension. Um, and his fight with Naruto is the absolute highlight of the entire arc for me. Uh, Easily my favorite part of it. Uh, Good spectacle, good character work. Excuse me, even good comedy in there. Just great stuff. Excuse me. And Yeah, it's just a really great climax to the overall arc. Um, yeah. And Liam O'Brien absolutely kills it as Gar in the dub when he has his psychotic breakdowns. Like, like you wonder, did Liam O'Brien like actually go crazy in that voice recording booth? Because he just does such a great job of portraying just the amount of distress and anger Gara feels, and his voice acting definitely contributes to the emotional effectiveness of all of Gara's moments. So, uh, if you can't tell from the amount of glazing I just gave Gara, he's, I think, easily the best character in this arc. Um, yeah, I think is perfect here. And then lastly, we have the main man himself, Naruto Uzumaki. So, like with Jiraiya, I want to get the negatives out of the way first. Naruto can still be very obnoxious at this point in the story, and he is still at times incompetent, and it gets really old really fast when he like continuously fails to understand something or act in a proper way when it seems like it would be so obvious. Like I get that comedy can be derived from that, but I feel like at this stage in the show Naruto should have developed past that already. Um but in the grand scheme, it's still something that I find relatively minor, even if I do think it hurts the show a little bit. And I think, a number of jokes fall flat with him, and I think his personality being unpleasant at times can make the narrative feel a little weaker. Um, because you can focus. My favorite parts of Naruto's character are his empathy that derives from how hurt he's been in the past, his moments of heroism, how much he cares about his friends, his determination, all that good stuff. And him being negatively characterized, I don't think really positively impacts his character the same way it does like a character like Neji or something like that. Even if it does make perfect sense that he would behave that way still, of course. He's an attention seeker and everything. He wants to prove himself. He has a chip on his shoulder. It makes sense that his behavior isn't, always great. Uh, as, someone who grew up without a guiding hand and is still figuring out, you know, how to be the person he should be and all that stuff. It makes sense. Still frustrates me. Um, and also, Naruto's good moments are a little bit sparse in the first half of the arc, in my opinion. His determination not to give up on like the written test, knowing he'd probably fail, and that he might become a genin for the rest of his life, just so he wouldn't hinder his teammates, is a nice little moment. Although the way it's executed is very over the top. He gives like a whole speech about it, and it feels a little, I guess, like overemphasized, overblown to me. And that's sort of a nitpick. Um, but it's a nice little bit of characterization for him. And in the Forest of Death, Naruto is mostly okay. His moment where he protects Sasuke from Orochimaru, and like gets Sasuke ready to fight again. It's a good little moment. It shows how far he's come from that scared little kid he was in episode 6 during the Land of Waves arc, the first episode of the Land of Waves arc. Um, and I do enjoy him showing off his endurance later against the clone user, but he doesn't do too much other than that of note that I can recall. To a particularly positive extent. And Naruto showing off his endurance is something that happens frequently elsewhere, so it's not that great. And his fight in the prelims, like I said, is fine. It reinforces um, how well we understand Naruto's determination, but he's already endured worse situations by that point in the story. So it's very minor, and they make a very big deal of something that I think is very minor. So we don't get too much out of that. My favorite moment in the first half of the arc is the moment I mentioned before with him talking or shouting at Hinata to keep going against Neji. I find it very endearing how invested he is in making sure that Neji doesn't get to convince Hinata that she is a failure and that she will remain a failure. And it makes sense to me that he would heavily relate to Hinata in that moment and feel like he has a personal stake in her victory. Because if Neji's right about her, Neji's right about Naruto, and also Naruto is able to put Naruto is able to put himself in Hinata's shoes, and understand, you know, that sort of stigma of being like the less talented person. And it makes sense that Naruto would start to develop a liking for her and care about her. That's good stuff. The second half of the arc is where most of the really good stuff for Naruto's character is. However, we do unfortunately start with uh, Naruto in the second half of this arc, with Naruto being at his absolute worst. Maybe not in the show as a whole, but in this arc where he plays off of Ebisu. And like I said, even if their antics are mildly amusing at times, the way Naruto behaves here really annoys me. Again, I do get why he behaves in this way, but I'm just not entertained by his brattiness towards the guy who, in spite of generally being very rude and treating Naruto very poorly, is genuinely trying to help Naruto train. And his failure to comprehend things in this little segment just leads to unnecessary repetition of information within the story. It's a frustrating bit to watch. But once Naruto meets obnoxious, I can't speak. Once Naruto meets Jiraiya, his brattiness is still there. Uh, but it feels dialed back. I'm not sure if it actually is dialed back, but like I said, because of the dynamic he has with Jiraiya, it feels more endearing since Jiraiya also bites back and is playful. And at times, Jiraiya deserves Naruto's chastisement. Um, and so the dynamic between Naruto and Jiraiya is just an immediate massive improvement over his dynamic with Ebisu. Uh, and we get more of his endurance and determination being demonstrated during his training with Jiraiya. Uh, and when Naruto speaks to the Nine Tails for the first time while falling to his potential doom during the frog training, and he demands rent from Kurama, I always find that to be a fun little bit. Um, Naruto likes acting tough when he is unsure of himself or unsure of the situation. And so him trying to basically threaten his way into getting the power from Kurama in order to save himself is funny to me. Um, his dynamic with Bunta after he gets the power from Kurama to summon him is one that I find funny, as I've said. And their interactions help me get more endeared to Naruto as, Gama Bunta is putting his pride on the line and trying to shake Naruto off of him, and Naruto just keeps trying, uh, keeps going. He almost makes it. It's good. He almost manages to, win his little bet with Gama Bunta that he can stay on his back all day. Uh, Naruto and Shikamaru have a fun dynamic in the hospital. Uh, and I like both of them leaping into action to save Lee. A lot of the stuff that applies to Shikamaru applies to Naruto here. Where, it's nice to see Naruto just having a positive, non obnoxious, like, sort of real moment of friendship with another kid his age. Uh, that again helps you endear yourself to him, makes him feel less of this like super loud bratty kid and more like a very genuine kid who has the faults of being a kid. He likes playing pranks and stuff, but he feels more like a real genuine like cute kid rather than this annoying guy everyone has to deal with in that moment. uh and of course, yeah, this is all part of his gradual transition into who he'd become much later in the show. And him helping Shikamaru help save Lee uh, gives Naruto another little hero moment. And I like Naruto's little hero moments. His immediate realization of how similar he is to Gaara is something I love. It demonstrates how powerful Naruto's empathy is regarding other people's pain and sort of his growing awareness that of what his former situation could have turned him into, and Naruto being aware of how similar his situation is to other like sort of villainous characters is very key for uh characters work and the interactions he would have with people later in the show. So Gaara having almost like the same one-to-one situation as Naruto, sort of pushing Naruto further down that path of empathy and understanding is really good stuff. Um, and since Naruto could have seen himself becoming like Gaara, it makes a lot of sense to me why he's able to show Gaara empathy at the end of their battle later in the arc. As soon as there's a lull in the action, of course. I do like that Naruto doesn't really talk too much to Gaara when other people's lives are at stake until neither of them can move. Uh, I think that works pretty well. That as soon as there's a lull in the action, Naruto is then able to express his empathy. Um, yeah, and I like that Naruto gets a little bonding moment with Hinata before the Neji fight, where he's feeling a little down and nervous, and Hinata telling him to do his best, and that she believes in him, is able to reinvigorate him the same way he was able to reinvigorate her. Makes them feel closer, and it's nice. I'm not a huge fan of the Neji fight itself, as I've said, but the way Naruto acts in the fight is solid. Successfully opening his mind to the possibility of breaking fate. Uh, the Gara fight is full of moments I love regarding Naruto's character. I'm pretty sure I've gone over all of them already. Uh, you know, there is also the opening kick against Gara to save Sasuke that always gets me excited. Um, yeah, there's the summoning of Gamakichi that I've mentioned before. Uh, Leads to him being rewarded for saving people. He gets scared of Gara again during the fight, if I recall correctly, and his determination to save his friends is what lets him overcome that fear. Very thematically appropriate. Um, and also further serves to help Gara understand what is driving Naruto and why Naruto was able to win. And when Naruto does lock in against Gaara, his use of shadow clones to hit Gaara cleanly with a paper bomb is both creative and visually engaging. I always like seeing Naruto being clever, and here it's very well demonstrated without being like over explained. Uh, we just see Naruto was able to create an opening, managed to hurt Gaara, and I think we get a very brief explanation, but it doesn't take like 5 minutes to be like, oh, this is all the ways Naruto created an opening. Isn't he clever? So that's good. And I like the 2K barrage where he just beats Gara up with 2,000 clones of himself. It's a good show of what his upper limit is. Uh, and then summons Bunta. Fun dynamic. I really like that both of them remain valuable in the fight against Shukaku. Because Bunta needs to deal with the big monster in Shukaku, and Naruto needs to help him change his shape so that he can grab Shukaku. So that once he does, Naruto can go wake up Gara. That's good and solid right there. Um, the final headbutt against Gara is great. It's a solid encapsulation of that sort of friendship motivated determination Naruto has. He's restrained in everything but his head, and he manages to push himself forward to just get that hit on Gara he needs. Um, and yeah, most importantly, I just love that Naruto is able to tell Gara that he knows how much his solitude must hurt. Naruto speaking about how his friends and mentors rescued him from that loneliness is something I find rather powerful here. And yeah, and of course, later in the show, Naruto saving Gara here and turning him into a good guy, helps save the world way down the line. Uh, and so, in spite of me still having some problems with Naruto's character in this arc, similarly to the last arc, he just has so many moments and one really big moment that I love a lot. And so I think last time he's gonna top out A tier. Uh, yeah, he's just he's a character of really high highs and a couple of low lows in part one. You know, once we get to like later in Shippuden, I will like him even more. But yeah, for now he's gonna remain. He's gonna be an A tier for a second time in a row. Uh, Yeah, and I could honestly see an argument for Naruto being put in any single one of these tiers, um, depending on how powerful you find some of his better moments versus how frustrating you find him in his weaker moments. But for me, those powerful moments heavily outweigh those obnoxious moments, and so I think Naruto is still a great character. So yeah, that's my list. That's I believe 41 characters from the Chunin Exam slash Konoha Crush. I do gotta say, I'm definitely a bigger fan of the Konoha Crush portion than I am of the Chunin Exams portion. Um, and like I said, would very much like to get into why in an arc review later. Uh, so yeah, I'm gonna hopefully do a little more of a few more of these tier lists. I might go all the way up to the war, get used to recording and stuff, and then figure out some editing and such. But thanks for watching. I hope you found my musings on Naruto enjoyable, and if you have any feedback as to how I go about talking about these guys, technical issues, or anything, please let me know. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a good day.